Hello. You know that feeling when you realize you've been the idiot in the room the whole time? That moment when the missing puzzle piece falls into place, and suddenly, everything looks different? Yeah, that was me, except instead of a puzzle, it was my marriage, and instead of missing a piece, it was more like someone had replaced half the damn thing with a picture of me wearing a clown wig. So let me introduce myself. I'm Ethan, 38, husband of Lauren, 36. We've been married for almost 10 years, which is roughly 3,650 days of me thinking I had a stable, loving wife and a predictable, normal life. It was good, comfortable, maybe a little routine, but hey, that's marriage, right? Lauren worked in marketing, some fancy mid-level position at a fashion brand. She always had a taste for the finer things, which was fine because we both made decent money. But lately, the finer things had started appearing in our house with suspicious frequency. A designer purse that a coworker gifted her. A necklace that she apparently won in a raffle. Shoes that a friend didn't like, so she gave them to me. At first, I bought it. Why wouldn't I? Lauren had always had good luck. She once won a free vacation through a radio contest. It wasn't impossible. But then the gifts started getting more extravagant. One day, she came home with a Cartier bracelet. A client gave it to me as a thank you. Sure, that's a totally normal thing that happens. You close a deal, and suddenly people start handing you gold and diamonds like you're in ancient Egypt. Then came the Chanel bag, a PR gift from work. Then the Tiffany earrings, a birthday gift from a friend. And finally, a Rolex watch. That was the moment when my brain finally caught up. She didn't wear Rolexes. Hell, she barely wore watches at all. And yet, there it was, sitting in her jewelry box, next to all the other new gifts. That's when I stopped believing in Lauren's fairy tale luck. I could have confronted her, sure. I could have thrown accusations and asked the obvious question. But I didn't. Because I wasn't ready for the answer. And because, if I was about to be made into a fool, I wanted to make damn sure I wasn't the only one losing in this equation. So instead, I waited. I watched. And I started planning. This is just the beginning. You ever get that slow, creeping feeling that something just isn't right, but your brain refuses to connect the dots? Like when you misplace your keys, spend 20 minutes looking for them, only to realize they've been in your pocket the whole time. That was me, except instead of keys, it was the realization that my wife wasn't just lucky. She was playing me. After that damn Rolex, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. And what I found was almost impressive. Almost. Lauren had perfected the art of deception through casual deflection. She never over-explained. Just gave simple, offhand answers that made me feel dumb for questioning her in the first place. Oh, the necklace? Yeah, Hannah didn't like how it looked on her, so she gave it to me. The bag? PR sent it over because they had extras from an event. The bracelet? I don't know. Some vendor at work gave it to me. People are so generous. See how neat and simple that is? Not too much detail, just enough to sound reasonable. If I had asked any more questions, I'd look like an insecure husband obsessing over nothing. And for a while, I bought it. But not anymore. I started noticing patterns. The jewelry always came in its original packaging, brand new, untouched, straight out of the store. That friend who didn't like her necklace? Somehow, she also didn't like the matching bracelet and earrings. The PR gifts? They were never anything basic, always the most expensive item from the collection. Then I checked our bank statements. Lauren had barely spent anything on herself in the past 6 months. No big shopping trips, no splurges. Yet she was constantly wearing new designer stuff. And I knew her salary, it wasn't that good. At this point, the obvious answer was another man. Some rich guy treating my wife like his personal dress-up doll. And yeah, that thought stung, but I wasn't about to break down over it. Not yet. Instead, I got curious. What kind of idiot was funding my wife's luxury lifestyle? Some desperate sugar daddy? A married boss looking for a thrill? Whoever it was, they weren't just buying her stuff, they were investing in her. And that's when it hit me. Lauren wasn't planning for us. She was gearing up for an exit, quietly replacing everything in her life with a more expensive version of before she left me in the dust. I should have been pissed. Maybe I was. But more than anything, I was amused. She thought she was being clever, but I had something she didn't, the element of surprise. So I did the one thing she'd never expect. I started selling her gifts. Just small things at first. A bracelet here, a pair of earrings there. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would set off alarms. But little by little, I started cashing out. Because if Lauren was planning an escape, I wanted to make sure that when she finally left, she'd be walking out with a lot less than she expected. And trust me, I was just getting started. If you ever want to ruin someone's day without them even realizing it, take something from them they don't even know they've lost. That was my approach. No screaming matches, no throwing suitcases into the street. Just silent, methodical payback, one designer trinket at a time. I started small, testing the waters. A pair of Tiffany earrings went first, listed them online, and sold them within hours. The money went straight into a separate account, one Lauren didn't know existed. Next was the Cartier bracelet, the same one she claimed was a gift from a client. That one fetched more than I made in a week. The best part? Lauren didn't even notice. Not at first. You see, that's the thing about people who take too much. They stop keeping track. They start believing they're entitled to the excess, so when a little goes missing, they don't question it. I started getting bolder. The Chanel bag? Gone. The Rolex? Sold to a collector across the country. The Louboutin heel she hadn't even worn yet? Some influencer in Miami bought them. I moved strategically, only taking what I knew she wouldn't immediately miss, spacing out the disappearances just enough that by the time she figured it out, it would be too late. And then, the moment of truth arrived. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to be absorbed in my phone, when I heard her voice from the bedroom. "Where's my gold bracelet?" She wasn't panicked. Not yet. Just mildly annoyed, the way someone gets when they misplace their keys. I waited, let the silence stretch out just enough before answering. "Haven't seen it." She rustled around, moving through her jewelry box, checking drawers, muttering under her breath. I could hear the mental calculations happening in real time, the moment her brain realized that something wasn't adding up. A minute passed. Then two. I could feel her staring at me from the doorway. "That bracelet was really expensive," she said, her tone shifting. Testing me. Watching for a reaction. I looked up, feigned mild interest. "Was it?" Her frown deepened. I could tell she was thinking, wondering if she had misplaced it or if something else was going on. But here's the thing about liars. They assume everyone else lies the way they do. She wasn't panicking because, in her mind, I couldn't possibly know what was really happening. She went through her things again the next day, then again the day after. Each time, I watched, waiting for the inevitable moment when she'd break. And then, just like that, she did. She came home one night with a brand new bracelet. A replacement. That told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't told her mysterious benefactor about the missing items. She was covering her tracks, just like I was. That's when I turned up the heat. The next thing to go wasn't jewelry. It was the little luxuries she took for granted. Her Uber account? Logged out. She thought it was a glitch. Her favorite high-end skincare products? Replaced with drugstore versions. She assumed she'd mixed them up. The bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion? Swapped for a cheap knockoff. She never even noticed. Every time she reached for something she expected to be there, it wasn't. And that's when I knew. Lauren wasn't just playing me, she was waiting for the right moment to leave. To walk out with her shiny new wardrobe, her expensive gifts, and whatever life she had lined up on the side. Too bad she had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. They say revenge is best served cold, but I found that it's even better when it's slow. Like a simmering pot, waiting to boil over, bubbling just enough to keep things interesting. Lauren still hadn't caught on. She had no clue that her carefully curated luxury collection was vanishing piece by piece, that I was unspooling her escape plan right under her nose. And why would she? In her mind, I was still Ethan the trusting, the guy who never questioned her ridiculous explanations, the husband who worked too much to notice anything. She thought she was subtle. That's what really got me. The way she'd leave the house in casual outfits, only to return wearing something a little too put together. The way her phone never left her side anymore, as if it held state secrets instead of what I already knew were flirty texts and gift negotiations. Her schedule suddenly at gaps. Mornings when she'd go for a long walk. Evenings when she'd be working late, but would come home looking too refreshed for someone who just spent 3 hours staring at spreadsheets. I could have confronted her. I could have followed her. But I was playing a different game. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to dismantle her life. First, I disrupted the money flow. She thought she was clever, using a separate credit card that wasn't tied to our joint account. What she didn't know was that the card was still under my name, something she had conveniently forgotten when she first signed up for it years ago. I logged in, adjusted some settings, and set up alerts for every purchase. It was like having a front row seat to her deception. Dinner at an expensive restaurant? Check. A hotel charge under a fake business name? Oh, that was a good one. She wasn't even creative enough to use cash. So, I did what any rational man would do. I froze the account. I'll never forget the look on her face when she walked into the house that night, just a little too flushed, and casually said, "Hey, did the bank mess with our cards? My payment didn't go through at dinner." I shrugged. Weird. Maybe fraud prevention. She paused for a second too long. Yeah, probably. I could see it then, the first tiny crack in her confidence. She wasn't worried about the money. She was worried that I'd start looking closer. And that was exactly what I wanted. But money was just one piece of the puzzle. The real fun was in what came next. I started leaving little breadcrumbs. Just enough to make her question if she was being watched. If maybe, just maybe, her careful balancing act wasn't so invisible after all. A moved lipstick in her purse. A slightly ajar drawer in her closet where she kept the new gifts. A casual comment about trust over dinner, watching her shift uncomfortably in her seat. She was starting to unravel, even if she wouldn't admit it yet. And then, the masterpiece, I found her backup suitcase. Neatly packed, hidden in the guest bedroom closet behind some winter coats. A just-in-case bag. Full of her best clothes, the most expensive ones, some of the gifts she thought I hadn't noticed, and oh, this was gold, a brand new passport with her maiden name on it. That's when I knew for sure. She wasn't just thinking about leaving me. She was planning an escape, which meant it was time for the final act. I zipped the suitcase shut, left it exactly as I found it. And then, with the calm of a man who already knew the ending to the story, I started setting my own stage. Lauren wanted to play games? She had no idea that she was already losing. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from watching someone's carefully laid plans fall apart right in front of them. It's like watching a house of cards sway, teeter, and then, just when they think it'll hold, collapse in slow motion. Lauren had no idea she was standing in the middle of a controlled demolition, and I was holding the detonator. The suitcase had been the final clue I needed. It meant she wasn't just testing the waters, she was ready to jump ship. And if she was getting ready to leave me, I decided I'd leave her first, but not in the way she expected. The first step was taking away her safety net. The money was already handled, her secret credit card frozen, her bank transactions flagged and monitored. But I wanted to tighten the noose. So, I made sure her car mysteriously stopped working one morning. Nothing major, just a quick visit under the hood to unplug a couple of key connections. Enough to make her think it had died on its own. She panicked, called a tow truck, and guess what? Her emergency savings account, the one she thought she could rely on, was suddenly locked due to suspicious activity. She had to call me. Me. The useless, oblivious husband she was trying to shake off. I let her sit in her frustration for a couple of hours before casually transferring just enough money to help her out. She thanked me through gritted teeth. I knew she was watching the calendar, waiting for the perfect moment to make her move. Probably waiting for a time when I'd be out of town or too distracted to notice she was gone until she was safely in someone else's arms, in someone else's home, wearing all the expensive things he'd bought her. Except she had no idea that while she was planning her grand exit, I was already leaving first. Step 2 was simple. I started moving my things out of the house quietly, piece by piece, so she wouldn't notice. A few clothes missing? Nothing she'd pay attention to. My tools? A loan to a friend. The safe that held our important documents? Well, let's just say it was no longer in our home, and neither were any of her papers. The lease on the apartment? Canceled. She didn't know it yet, but by the end of the month, this place would no longer be hers. And then, the coup de grace. One afternoon, while she was out shopping with friends, which I now assumed meant something very different, I paid a little visit to the guest bedroom and swapped her escape suitcase with an identical one, only instead of her designer clothes and expensive gifts, it was filled with cheap thrift store junk. The real one? Sitting safely in my car. Now, all that was left to do was wait. And sure enough, the moment came. Late one night, Lauren thought I was asleep. I heard her tiptoeing through the apartment, heard the careful, quiet shuffling of her things. Then, the soft click of the front door as she left for good, or so she thought. I didn't get up, didn't chase after her. I just smiled, turned over in bed, and went to sleep like a man who had already won. Because in the morning, when she opened that suitcase, she would realize she had nothing. No money, no jewelry, no fancy clothes. Nothing left of the life she thought she had secured. And when she tried to return home, well, there would be nothing left of that, either. I woke up that morning feeling weightless. Not just lighter, completely unburdened. The apartment was silent, peaceful, untouched by the presence of someone who had spent months treating me like an afterthought. Lauren was gone. And the best part? She thought she had left on her own terms. I let her breathe in the illusion for a little while. Gave her a few hours to savor her so-called victory. I imagined her stepping into whatever high-end hotel or lover's apartment she had planned for herself, unzipping that suitcase, expecting to find all her precious belongings, the ones she had been carefully curating for months. The ones she thought would carry her into her new life. And then, the horror of realization. Old sweatpants with bleach stains. A pair of second-hand running shoes 2 sizes too big. A floral muumuu dress from a thrift store clearance bin. Random books from a forgotten donation pile. Everything except what she had packed. I pictured the look on her face, the confusion, the creeping panic as she rifled through the suitcase, desperately searching for her designer bags, her jewelry, her little trophies of deception. The sheer horror of understanding that everything she had planned was gone. I let that reality marinate before I played my next move. At precisely 11 a.m., I sent a simple text. Hope you love your new wardrobe. You earned it. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. A hesitation, a stall, a moment of sheer chaos happening on the other side of the screen. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, enjoying the delicious silence of knowing she was spiraling. Then the call came. I let it ring out. She called again. And again. By the 4th attempt, I finally picked up, but I didn't say a word. Just let the sound of her shaky breathing fill the line. Ethan. Her voice was all forced composure, all strained patience. Something happened. My suitcase. It's not mine. I think there was a mix-up at the airport or something. I need you to check at home. Oh, Lauren. Still trying to play it cool. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. Oh, sweetheart, I said, my voice dripping with mock concern. That's so strange. Because the suitcase I found in our closet, the one with the new passport, the getaway money, and all your stolen treasures, well, that one's in my trunk. Silence. A dead, gaping silence. I let her sit with it for a moment before finishing. I also had the locks changed this morning, just in case you had any ideas about coming home. She broke. Right there on the phone. Please, Ethan, listen. I can explain. Explain what? I cut her off, my tone sharp now. That you planned to leave me months ago? That you thought you could fund your next life with gifts bought by someone else while keeping me on standby as your fool? No, Lauren, I think I get it. She stammered, her voice rising with desperation, but I had no interest in hearing it. You know what the funniest part is? I continued, ignoring her pleading. Even if you somehow crawl back here, there's nothing waiting for you. The lease? Cancelled. Your car? Towed. Your name? Removed from every bill, every account. You don't exist in this life anymore. She choked out something, a half sob, half protest, but I wasn't listening anymore. I ended the call, blocked her number. And just like that, Lauren was officially erased. She had spent so much time thinking she was in control, thinking she was carefully orchestrating her escape, but she had no idea that she was the one being played the entire time. And the best part? I wasn't even done yet. Because there was one final touch left to deliver. One last gift before I closed this chapter for good. You ever watch a building collapse? Not a dramatic Hollywood explosion, a controlled demolition. The kind where the charges are placed just right, the structure wobbles for a second, and then everything folds in on itself like a house of cards. That was Lauren. She didn't even know she was standing in a crumbling building until I walked away and let gravity handle the rest. I gave her time to panic. Let her sit with her empty suitcase, let her run through every possible way out, let her realize there was none. Then I started hearing from mutual friends. Lauren was unraveling. Calling people, making up stories, trying to spin the situation. Ethan locked me out. He went crazy. But when people asked why, her answers were flimsy. She was grasping at straws, realizing that her safety net had a massive hole in it. Then came her next move, or what she thought was her next move. She showed up at my office. Bold, I'll give her that. She came in looking polished but desperate, like she had spent the whole morning trying to fix herself up, trying to present some version of control. She stood in the lobby, expecting me to cave, expecting me to come down, to give her an audience, to let her spin her web one last time. I didn't. Instead, I had security escort her out. No words. No confrontation. Just a cold, efficient reminder that she was nothing to me now. That's when I knew she was at her breaking point. Because later that night, she showed up at the apartment. The apartment that was no longer hers. She banged on the door, screamed my name, demanded to be let in. Ethan, we need to talk. I just sat on the couch, drinking a whiskey, listening to the beautiful sound of her realizing she had nowhere to go. And then came the final touch. I had one last gift for Lauren. A little something to truly ensure she understood just how deep she had buried herself. I sent her an email. One single email. The subject line? A farewell present. Inside? A collection of screenshots. Every receipt, every message, every secret little purchase she thought she had hidden. But the best part? A single screenshot, an email thread between me and her mysterious benefactor. See, I had done some digging. Found out exactly who had been funding her luxury lifestyle. A married man. One with a wife who would not be pleased to find out her husband had been treating Lauren like a shopping mall. And guess what? I had already forwarded everything to his wife. The email ended with just one sentence. I guess you're not the only one whose life just got erased. Then I blocked her. Permanently. No closure. No final words. No long, drawn-out breakup conversation where she could cry and twist the narrative into something that made her feel less guilty. Just silence. A complete, crushing void where her comfortable little double life used to be. I like to think about where she is now. Maybe still spiraling, trying to patch together what's left of her world. Maybe she's grifting her way into someone else's life, starting the cycle all over again. But it doesn't matter. Because in my world, she doesn't exist anymore. And that's the real revenge. Bye-bye.